Hi, everyone. Today, Chip and I are going to discuss just some overview of some tips and how to prepare for your interview to be the best possible interviewer and candidate. So, yeah,
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Marilyn. Hope you guys find this helpful. So, when preparing for an interview, the first thing that I always recommend that a candidate does or that you would do to prepare for your interview is to really familiarize yourself with your resume first. That's where your interviewer is going to learn everything about you before they're speaking with you. So, they're obviously going to ask you questions about your resume. So familiarize yourself with your resume and the projects that you have listed on there. Be ready to talk about them. They won't necessarily, HR won't necessarily get into that with you, but I think the hiring manager definitely will dive a little bit deeper into your resume than HR will. So just sort of general overview of interview tips here. For HR, hiring managers, or whoever. But the second thing that I always recommend too, the first two steps are to go through the job description for the role that you're interviewing for and look at each of the bullet points and think about what it is that you've done that pertains to that specific position. If there's a project that you've worked on, if it's a pricing position and you've worked on a pricing product or project with some of the products that their company does, that's awesome. Be able to talk about that, the successes that you had on that project, that type of thing. Just really draw conclusions or similarities between what you've done to date and what this position will be calling for. Because that just shows not only that you've done your homework, but also that you have relevant experience for the position and can be an asset to the team. Marilyn, what's the first thing that you usually tell candidates to do?
yeah, I would agree. And kind of piggybacking off of looking at that job description and writing out your experience, I also usually recommend writing out examples or actual stories. And it's a good way to bring them front to mind so that you can bring them up during the interview, obviously, if it's relevant. And it's also a good way to motivate yourself and remind yourself that you are qualified for the role. So that is another helpful aspect of writing out that experience. And I definitely think it's a good start and a good motivator too.
Yeah, I think one thing to be careful about with that is I think that's a great point, writing them out or like highlighting parts of the job description that you have done something relevant to that specific bullet point or requirement or whatever it is. But I think the one thing to just be mindful of when you are writing out your experience, how it pertains to the role, is not to have those notes in front of you if it's a video call. And or even if it's a phone call, you don't want to sound like you're on a recorded line or that you're literally just reading. You want it to be very personable. So writing that out is sort of a good exercise. It's sort of like making note cards in college. By the time you're done with your note cards, you pretty much already know the material. So it's very similar. It's a good exercise in that way, so that it's just top of mind. You do it two nights or the night before the interview or what have you, and that way you really just remember it just by writing it out and thinking about it. That way you're ready to talk about it on the actual call. Just general guidelines. You really want to show that you're excited in the position, and you want to show that in the tone of your voice. It's called inflection. By just sounding excited, being appreciative, that type of thing about them telling you more about the position. But one way that you can be knowledgeable about what you're going to be asked about or what you're going to talk about is to do your research on the company. Spend some time on their website, maybe 30 minutes to an hour, maybe even a little bit longer before. Familiarize yourself with their website, any press releases, news articles, or anything like that. Just really be knowledgeable about sort of what's going on at the company right now. Also, all the products that they work on. Familiarize yourself with those products. Be able to talk about that and just show that you've done your homework, because that will go a long way, and that'll set you aside from some people who maybe haven't. You definitely don't want to get into an interview with a P&C company and say that you're looking forward to working for a health insurance company because you didn't realize this was a P&C job. And believe me, that's happened. So doing your homework on the company is a great thing. And from there, you can also put together a couple of questions for your interviewer. We typically recommend like 3 or 4 questions for your interviewer or interviewers. Uh, one or two of those questions, try to generate them from things that you found out from your research. I noticed that you guys are trying to expand into 3 new states. What's that going to do to your business? Or you're getting into this product and you haven't done that before. How's that going to integrate with your current business and other products that you're currently working on within the actuarial team? Something like that. Just doing your homework and being knowledgeable about the company is a huge thing for sure.
Definitely. Yeah, and I would agree. And the biggest point of that is that to be specific, of course, and to show that you did give it a deeper thought. And that's what Chip is saying by asking the question in the way that you just formatted it, shows that you've thought about it further and how the business actually works. And that's big. I know it's a bummer when you're a qualified candidate, you'd be great for the role, but you forgot to do your research. And we see this happen. And our client doesn't want to move someone forward who didn't show that interest, because it really does show a lack of interest by the fact that you weren't looking into the company. So that's a really big aspect, and I know that some people don't do as naturally as some of the other tips, so it's great to keep in mind.
One other thing is salary, that will definitely get asked at some point in the interview process. A lot of times it's with HR, which will be your first call. The salary is not always posted on the website. You might not know what the salary is for the position. I think the best way to frame that, I mean, especially wanting to become an actuary and this being your first actuarial position, you shouldn't be too stuck on salary. I mean, you should take what they're willing to pay you and what they think that your fair market value is. And I think that's one good way to frame it is, whatever is commensurate with your experience and your exams and what they feel that your market value is. But I think the bigger picture is just framing it that you're more interested in the opportunity than, and learning more about the company. Um, and would be happy to entertain whatever salary they think would be right for your experience and level of exams and what have you. And just sort of swing it that way and just leave it open ended. You don't want to go in asking for 85,000, knowing that entry level actuaries probably aren't going to get 85,000 on base salary for their first position. Um, any other hints on that, Marilyn?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's great and is a great point in terms of entry as well, because yeah, for entry levels, you're not working with too wide of a range. Another point, kind of separately from that, that I did want to point out, and it might be silly, but that is be sure that you know how to explain what an actuary is. I know you could have a good understanding of it, but may not know how to necessarily communicate it in a concise and specific way. So make sure that you're able to do that, because as you know, with the future of actuarial science, a big thing is being able to communicate your technical findings and understanding to a non-technical audience. So you might be speaking to that HR contact who isn't an actuary, and it's really important that you're able to discuss that in a way that someone else would understand. So yeah, just keeping that in mind in general, to be specific and concise, and to be sure that what you're saying is understood, and that you understand personally what you're talking about is huge.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The backroom actuary that used to be
Yeah.
is not so much anymore, and almost everybody has to interact with other departments internally or other people externally, at whether it's a conference or it's a client. If you're in a client facing role, communication skills, both written and verbal, are huge. So you'll definitely want to be able to, again, be excited and talk about that type of thing and put it in layman's terms for people that might not be an actuary, because we all know how complicated and how in depth an actuary can be and how many different things there are that actuaries do. So being able to just explain that pretty easily and talk about it on, sort of a lower grade level, is huge. So that's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, even with that too, if they're asking you about your technical skills, obviously they can read your resume and see what's on there. So be sure to give examples of how you've used your technical skills if they do ask about that. And just again, reminding you to be specific, because that is honestly the feedback that we almost see the most. And that is that someone wasn't specific or enough, or didn't develop their thought enough on that. And now it's important to find that line between developing your thought and explaining and ranting. So
Yeah.
that's all things to keep in mind.
clear and concise is
Yeah.
huge. Get to the point and leave it there.
Yeah.
But no, that's a great point. We do get a lot of feedback that people haven't really been able to explain their experience, to date. And some like we know that he's qualified, or he or she is qualified, but they couldn't really tell us why, or they couldn't explain their experience. So it goes back to familiarizing yourself with the job and your resume, but just being able to talk about that. So if you need to talk in front of a mirror and practice speaking and talking about your experience, then do that. If that's going to be, one of the hardest parts for you, or call a friend and or talk to a parent or something and just act like they're the interviewer and just practice talking it out to somebody else, or even yourself in the mirror.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, that's the thing. Overall, if you do your homework and your research, or as Chip mentioned at the beginning, it really is like your study guide before a test when you're preparing for this interview. And everyone can tell when they've done their diligence and written out their full study guide or not. And the confidence that comes with that preparation is huge and also plays into your success of the interview mostly.
Yeah, and it does away with awkward silences that you never want. Um, if you can talk educatedly about what they have questions for you on, and you can have a conversation. I mean, conversational interviews are the best type of interviews. That's when they get to know the type of person that you are and what have you. So if you can speak, um, educatedly about anything that they're asking about because you've done your homework, you should be good to go.
Yeah, definitely. So, Chip and I will actually be releasing different interview style interviews as well down the line. Our next will be a mock interview for HR as well. So, we're excited to release all of this for you guys and to continue to share some tips.
Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah,
Talk to you
thank
guys
you.
soon.
We'll see you
See you
next
guys.
time.